One afternoon changed my woodworking forever. How, you might ask? Well, let me explain. For years, I relied on power tools, precise measurements, and computer-generated designs. They were faster, more precise, better. Or at least that's what I thought. Then one afternoon, I took my first whisper-thin shaving, and that got me thinking. Did the craftsmen of the past know something we'd lost? Had I been wrong all these years? And more importantly, was this the thing holding me back as a maker? So today, I want to find out, are hand tools actually better than power tools? But first, I was gonna need some hand tools.
And how much did that cost?
It's a write-off. Honestly, at this point, I think Lee Nelson should give me airline miles or something. The deeper I got into this world, the more I realized something uncomfortable. Buying hand tools didn't make me a craftsman. If anything, it just exposed how little I actually knew. And after 13 years of building furniture, I was a beginner again. The feeling where you realize you don't even know what's possible yet. And somewhere around this point, I basically became Neo taking the red pill, because once I started seeing what was possible with hand tools, I needed to know just how far this rabbit hole went. So I found a mentor. A guy who had spent the last 20 years or so working for Lee Nelson, teaching people how to use these tools properly. And almost immediately, I realized this wasn't really about the tools at all. It was about learning how to see. He taught me how to sharpen, how to set up a plane, how to read the grain before making a cut, how to stop fighting the wood and work with it instead. He showed me how to turn a mallet on a lathe. That little project probably taught me more than some entire furniture builds, because every tiny mistake showed up immediately. Nothing was hidden, and that was kind of the point. The old masters weren't using hand tools because they were nostalgic. They used them because the tools force precision, force attention, force understanding. And the deeper we got into it, the more I realized this wasn't something I could buy my way into. I couldn't shortcut it. There was no secret jig, no magic plane, no perfect sharpening angle. There was only the path, and he could point me toward it, but it was up to me to walk it out. And then came the reps, because it turns out watching someone take a perfect shaving and actually doing it yourself are two very different things. So I sharpened. Not until I got it right, until I couldn't get it wrong. I took my planes apart just to understand how they worked. Every adjustment mattered. The mouth, the lateral adjustment, chip breaker position, blade projection. Tiny changes, tiny feedback, and slowly I started learning by feel. You know, there's really only so many adjustments you can make before the tool just tells you what it wants. And when I got stuck, I asked questions, watched every video I could find, and dug through old books trying to figure out what the old masters understood that I didn't. And eventually, I took my first truly perfect shaving. It felt like magic. But then I realized something. Taking a shaving is one thing, building furniture by hand is another. Because how on earth do you flatten a board square on all four sides and make everything parallel without machines? I could do it in my sleep with power tools, or at least I thought the boards were flat. That's when I started studying the old masters more seriously, and one thing kept coming up over and over again. Their apprentices made their own tools, not because they couldn't buy them, because building the tools taught the foundation of the craft itself. So that's what I decided to do. Build a few simple tools from wood, tools I'd actually use, but more importantly, tools that would teach me something along the way. But these tools had to be stable, accurate, which meant I needed the right wood. Basically, flat sawn moves more, so I needed something quarter sawn or rift sawn for some more stability. The first tool I built was a straight edge, which sounds simple until you realize most things that look straight aren't. A straight edge teaches you how to see gaps, tiny imperfections. The old masters understood something I was only beginning to learn. Precision isn't about machines, it's about observation. Then came the winding sticks. Before this, I didn't even know how to properly see twists in a board. I just trusted the machines. But winding sticks forced me to slow down, to check, to look carefully. And once you learn to see twist, you can't unsee it. Then I built a tri-square, and this tool humbled me fast because close enough doesn't work with a square. You're either square or you're not. And when a reference tool is off, everything after it is off too. You can only build practice pieces for so long. At some point, you have to build something real, something where mistakes actually matter. So I decided to start building drawers for some built-ins I made in a hidden room behind our closet, which I guess isn't much of a secret anymore. But they felt like the perfect next step. The cuts needed to be good, but if they weren't perfect yet, at least they weren't for a client or our kitchen. So I milled the stock, laid out the joints, and grabbed my saw, and immediately realized I had another problem. The little scraps I had practiced on were one thing, but these drawer parts were longer. And the second I tried to clamp them in my leg vise, the whole setup started fighting me. The boards hit the center screw. They flexed while I cut. Nothing felt stable. And when you're trying to cut dovetails by hand, movement is the enemy. That's when I realized something else the old craftsman understood. The joinery is only part of the equation. You also need a way to hold the work properly. So I built a Moxon vise. This was one of those movements where the deeper lessons started clicking for me. Because with power tools, I used to think almost entirely about the cut itself. But hand tool woodworking is different. The setup matters, the work holding matters, the height matters, the stability matters. Everything affects the cut. And apparently the craftsman before me had already solved this problem a few hundred years ago. Luckily, when I built my Rubo bench, I also bought some bench-crafted hardware for a future Moxon vise. At the time, I didn't really know why I needed it. I just knew every serious hand tool woodworker seemed to have one. Now, I finally understood why. And around this point, I stopped feeling like I was just experimenting with hand tools. I was building an entire system around them, a way of working. One that was slower, more intentional, but also strangely satisfying. So, I milled the parts, cut the joinery, added some cork to the jaws for grip, and then I had to wait for the epoxy to dry. And while I was waiting for the epoxy to dry, I made a terrible decision. I found a lathe on Facebook Marketplace. At this point, the whole thing was starting to feel like that children's book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. Because apparently, if you give a woodworker a hand plane, eventually he's going to end up buying a lathe. The deeper I got into traditional woodworking, the more I realized every skill seemed connected to another. You learn sharpening, which leads to hand planes. Hand planes leads to work holding. Work holding leads to joinery. And somehow, joinery leads to driving across town to buy a giant spinning machine from a stranger on Facebook Marketplace. But the second I turned it on, I understood why people get obsessed with turning. There's something hypnotic about it. A rough block spinning at 1,000 RPM and slowly becoming something useful. So naturally, I started making more mallets because apparently one wasn't enough. I started realizing this whole process wasn't really about furniture anymore. It was about learning the language of the craft itself. A day later, the epoxy was finally dry, and the second I clamped the first board into the Moxon, I understood why everyone kept recommending these things. Suddenly, the work was higher, more stable, closer to my eyes. For the first time, it felt like the setup was actually helping me instead of fighting me, which turned out to be another lesson the old masters already understood. Good work holding doesn't just make the work easier, it makes precision possible. My cuts immediately started improving, not because I suddenly became more skilled overnight, but because I had removed one more variable. That's something I kept discovering over and over again through this whole process. Most mistakes aren't caused by one big thing, they're caused by tiny inconsistencies stacking on top of each other. A dull blade, a shifting board, a bad reference edge, rushing a cut. And hand tools expose every single one of them, which sounds frustrating, but weirdly, that's what started making the process so addictive. Because every time I solved one problem, the work got a little quieter, a little smoother, a little more intuitive. Slowly, the dovetail started feeling less like survival and more like rhythm. So I practiced, again and again and again. At first, I was just surviving the cuts. But slowly, I started understanding them. Tiny adjustments in saw angle, how hard to chop with the chisel, how a knife line can change the entire cut, and grain direction can either help you or completely betray you. Little by little, the gap started disappearing. Somewhere along the way, I stopped obsessing over the final joint and started enjoying the practice itself. Every cut demanded complete attention. There was no autopilot, no hiding mistakes behind a machine, just skill or the lack of it. There was something incredibly freeing about that. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to perform, I was learning. And that's what pulled me so deeply into hand tools. Not nostalgia, not tradition, but the fact they refuse to let you fake mastery. Every weakness gets exposed, which sounds frustrating, until you realize that's exactly what makes them so rewarding. And then one day, one slid together perfectly. Well, almost perfectly. In this process, I realized hand tools weren't changing the furniture nearly as much as they were changing me. Because once you started paying attention to the details, it's hard to stop. Now for years, if something was too wide for my planer, I flattened it with a router sled, then sanded it smooth and called it done. I thought it looked pretty good. But the first time I flattened a board by hand, I realized something. Power tools can make wood look flat. Hand tools teach you what flat actually is. And the craziest part, in some ways, it's actually faster. No dust collection, no router sled setup, no sanding for hours. Just sharp steel and feedback. And the surface it leaves behind, it doesn't even feel like it came from the same material. So are hand tools better than power tools? Actually, I think that's the wrong question. Power tools help me build furniture faster. Hand tools taught me how to actually understand the craft. They forced me to slow down, to feel the material, to pay attention, to be more intentional. Woodworking stopped feeling like production and started feeling more like practice. What's funny is, before any of this happened, before the hand tools, before the sharpening, before I understood any of this, I had already built the workbench. A Rubo I waited 13 years to build. At the time, I thought I was just building a bench, but looking back, I think I was building the thing that would lead me here. And if you want to check out that video, you can watch it here.